Week my sister's fiancé told my parents I wasn't polished enough to attend their engagement dinner. I had just signed a contract worth $31,000 to photograph a 3-day wedding in Napa. I didn't tell anyone that part. I just said, okay, and went back to editing photos in my apartment at 11:30 at night. The glow of the monitor the only light in the room. My name is not important. What matters is this. I was 28 years old. I owned a camera, and my family had decided that made me a liability. Let me back up. My older sister, Ainsley, is the kind of person our mother always wanted to be. She graduated from Vanderbilt with a degree in finance, moved to Chicago, got a job at a consulting firm where people wore blazers on casual Fridays, and somewhere along the way got engaged to a man named Preston who had the handshake of someone who had practiced it in a mirror. Preston's family owned 4 car dealerships in the suburbs and a lake house in Wisconsin, the kind of people who said summer as a verb. I was the other one. I started shooting photos when I was 16 with a secondhand Nikon my dad found at a garage sale. I wasn't trying to make a career out of it. I was just trying to make sense of things, the way light came through the kitchen window at 6 a.m., the way my grandmother's hands looked when she was shelling peas on the back porch. I studied at a state school, double majored in visual arts and communications, graduated with a solid GPA and $24,000 in student loans, and moved back home for 8 months while I tried to figure out what came next. My mother, during those 8 months, said the phrase real job approximately 400 times. She wasn't mean about it. That's the thing that made it harder. She was worried. She loved me in the way that people love something fragile, carefully from a distance, always bracing for it to break. My dad worked in manufacturing for 30 years at the same plant, same shift, same parking spot. My mom was an office manager at a pediatric clinic for 22 years. They were people who understood steady. They did not understand freelance. When I told them I was going to try wedding photography full-time, my mother went very quiet in the way she did when she was trying not to say something she would regret. My dad said, "That's not really a career, is it?" Not cruel, just honest in the way that fathers sometimes are when they're confusing honesty with discouragement. Ansley, for her part, said nothing. She was already in Chicago by then. She texted me a thumbs-up emoji when I told her, which I understood to mean, I support you the way you support a decision you think is bad but can't stop. For the first 2 years, they weren't entirely wrong. I photographed everything I could get. Engagement sessions for $200, headshots for $75. One truly miserable afternoon, photographing a quinceañera where the DJ played Despacito 14 consecutive times, and I smiled through all of it because the family tipped me $40 in cash and I needed it. I second shot for more established photographers on weekends, carrying equipment and staying quiet and watching how they moved through a room, how they found the light, how they talked to nervous brides. I took online courses. I built a website at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday. I read every business forum I could find. I cold emailed venues. I ate a lot of peanut butter and toast. By year 3, something shifted. I can't point to the exact moment. It's not like the movies where there's one big break and then everything is different. It was more like a series of small doors opening. A bride whose sister happened to plan corporate events. A venue coordinator who remembered my name and started referring me to clients. A styled shoot that got picked up by a wedding blog with 200,000 monthly readers, and suddenly my inbox had inquiries from people I'd never met who said they'd found me online. I raised my prices, people still booked. I raised them again, people still booked. By the time Ainsley got engaged, she called me on a Tuesday in March, and I could hear the ring in her voice before she said a word. I was shooting 22 weddings a year, had a second photographer I subcontracted regularly, and was on retainer with 2 boutique event planning companies in the city for quarterly corporate shoots. I had paid off my student loans 8 months earlier. I had not told my parents any of this. Not because I was hiding it, more because it never seemed like the right time, and also because some part of me was still waiting for it to fall apart. You spend enough years being the one everyone worries about, and you start doing the worrying yourself. So when Ainsley called, I was happy for her. I genuinely was. Preston was fine. He was the kind of fine that is very consistent. He would never do anything surprising, wonderful, or terrible. He would always be exactly what he appeared to be, which was a man in a fleece vest who had strong opinions about the correct way to load a dishwasher. But he made Ainsley happy, and Ainsley being happy made my mother happy, and that was enough. "We're doing a small dinner," Ainsley said. "Just family and Preston's parents, to celebrate." "When?" "3 weeks from Saturday at Mom and Dad's." "I'll be there," I said. There was a pause. I didn't know how to read. "Actually," she said, "that's kind of what I was calling about." She explained it carefully, the way you explain something to someone you've decided in advance not to argue with. Preston's mother, Claudette, was apparently very particular. Claudette had strong ideas about things, about appearances, about what a family gathering should look like, about the impression it would make. Preston had told Ainsley that his mother was already a little uncertain about the engagement. Not about Ainsley specifically, but about the family, the background, the whole picture. And apparently, and here Ainsley's voice got quiet and a little strange, apparently my profession had come up. "Preston mentioned you do photography," she said. "I do." He told his mom, and she said it sounded like a hobby, and she asked if the whole family was like that, whether we were, she said, established. I waited. "Mom thinks it would be better if he didn't come to the dinner," Ainsley said. "Just this one. Just so things start on the right foot with Claudette." I want to be honest about what happened inside me when she said that. It wasn't just hurt, though it was that. It was something older. It was the feeling of being 8 years old and having a teacher display my drawing on the bulletin board and coming home to tell my mother and having her say, "That's sweet, honey. But did you finish your math homework?" It was the feeling of being not quite enough in a family that loved me and still somehow couldn't quite see me. "I understand," I said. "You're not upset?" "I'm fine," I said. "Tell them I hope it goes well." I hung up and sat on the floor of my home office for a while, not dramatically, just I needed to be on the floor. The carpet was soft and the room was quiet, and I let myself feel it fully for about 15 minutes, and then I stood up, made coffee, and went back to editing a wedding from the previous weekend. The bride had laughed so hard at the altar that she cried, and her groom had touched her face like she was something rare. It was good work. I focused on that. My parents never called. That was maybe the part that sat with me longest. My mother called Ainsley every Sunday. She called me maybe once a month, sometimes less. I had stopped tracking it the way I used to because tracking it made me sad, and being sad about it felt like a waste of time when I had work to do. But they knew about the dinner. They made the decision with Ainsley. And they didn't call. I sent my dad a card for his birthday 2 months later. He texted back, "Thanks, sweetie." 2 words. Meanwhile, I kept working. In April, I was hired to photograph a 3-day retreat in Sedona for a tech company's executive team. The lead planner was a woman named Marguerite, who had built her event coordination business from nothing in her living room 12 years earlier, and now employed 11 people and coordinated events across 5 states. She was 53, wore her gray hair short, laughed loud, and had a framed quote on her office wall that said, "Revenue is applause." She became something of a mentor to me, not in a formal way. We never sat down and called it that, but in the way of someone who occasionally says the exact right thing at the exact right moment. After the Sedona shoot, she told me over dinner that I undercharged. "By how much?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow and named a figure. I put down my fork. "You have a style," she said. "Style is a luxury good. Luxury goods are priced differently." I went home and rebuilt my pricing structure entirely. The next 6 months were the best of my career. I shot a wedding at a restored mill in Vermont that was featured in a regional bridal magazine. I was hired to photograph a book launch party in Nashville for an author whose memoir had debuted at number 4 on the Times list. I second shot one final time, not because I needed to, but because the lead photographer was someone who had been kind to me when I was starting out, and she was shooting the wedding of a senator's daughter and wanted someone she trusted. I was, in the most quiet and private way, doing well. I still hadn't told my family. I know that sounds strange, but here's the thing about family silence: it goes both ways. They hadn't called. I hadn't updated them. We had reached a kind of equilibrium that felt like distance but functioned like peace. I wasn't angry, exactly. I had moved through the anger in those 15 minutes on the carpet, and what was left was something more like clarity, like knowing exactly where you stood and deciding what to do about it. What I decided was keep working, keep building, see what happens. What happened was a phone call in November from a woman named Darlene, who coordinated events at the Chicago Botanical Garden. She was planning a gala, a large one, a fundraiser for a children's literacy nonprofit, black tie, 400 guests, sponsored by 6 companies, including 2 with names I recognized immediately. The lead planner had recommended me. I asked who the lead planner was. Marguerite, Darlene said. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The gala was in February. I flew into Chicago 2 days before to scout the venue, meet the florals team, and walk the space with Darlene. On the evening of the event, I arrived 90 minutes early. I always do. I like the room before the people arrive, the way it holds potential, the tables set and the lights soft and everything about to begin. I was adjusting a lens setting near the entrance when I heard my name. Not my full name, just Ren. I turned around. My mother was standing 10 feet away in a black dress I didn't recognize, holding a small beaded clutch. My father was next to her in a sport coat. And behind them, in a charcoal suit, was Preston. And beside Preston, in a deep burgundy gown, was Ainsley. For a moment, none of us moved. My mother's face did something complicated. She looked at me, really looked, the way she hadn't in a long time. And then she looked at my camera and my equipment bag and the laminated credential around my neck that said Piattographer, official, and I watched something shift in her expression. Not guilt exactly, something more confused than that. "You're working here?" she asked. "I'm the event photographer," I said, "for the gala." Preston's mother appeared from behind Ainsley, and I recognized her from photos. Tall, silver-haired, the kind of woman who had a signature of some kind, probably a brooch. She looked at my credential and then at me, and her expression went through several revisions very quickly. "You're the photographer they hired?" she said. "Marguerite recommended you?" "Yes," I said. "I follow your website," she said. "Your Vermont Mill wedding. I've shown it to 3 people." Ainsley looked at me. I couldn't entirely read her face, but I thought I saw something around her eyes that was close to the look she gave me when we were kids, and I'd figured out something she hadn't. My mother very quietly said, "Ren." Just my name. That was all. But the way she said it had about 4 years of something in it. Recognition, maybe, or the particular kind of grief that comes from realizing you had the wrong picture of someone and you're not sure when it happened. "I have to work," I said. "I'll find you after." I walked away before anyone could say anything else, and I put my eye to the viewfinder, and I started doing what I do. I photographed that room for 4.5 hours. I photographed the donor wall and the floral installations and the first guests arriving and the children who had benefited from the literacy program and were brought up on stage to read aloud. I photographed an elderly man wiping his eyes when a 10-year-old girl read a passage from Charlotte's Web. I photographed the speeches and the dancing and the moment the lead organizer, overwhelmed, pressed both hands to her face when they announced the final donation total. I was good at this. I had always been good at this. I had just never made my family watch. Around 10 o'clock, I found my mother at a table near the edge of the room. My dad was talking to someone nearby. She was sitting alone with a glass of wine she wasn't really drinking. I sat down. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "How long?" "How long what?" "How long has it been like this?" I thought about it honestly. A couple years, I said. Maybe 3 if you count when it started to feel real. She set down her wine glass. She had her hands folded on the table the way she did when she was holding something in. I didn't know, she said. I know. We should have. She stopped, started again. The dinner. I should have called you after. You should have called me before, I said. Not harsh, just accurate. She nodded. She wasn't going to argue with that, which was something at least. I'm sorry, she said. And then, slower. I think I was scared for you for so long that I forgot to look at what was actually happening. I thought about the 8 months at home, the real job comments, the way she'd said photography, with a slight pause before it, like she was deciding whether to believe in it, the way my dad had said, that's not really a career, is it? And how I'd carried that question with me for years after, sometimes as a wound and sometimes as fuel. I know you were scared, I said. I was scared too. She looked up at me. I didn't tell you because I was waiting for it to fall apart, I said. I kept thinking, 1 more month, one more booking, then I'll tell them. And then it kept not falling apart. My mother laughed a little. The kind of laugh that's half something else. My dad came over a few minutes later and sat down across from me. He looked at my camera bag on the chair beside me. He looked at me. Darlene told me what they paid you for tonight, he said. I raised an eyebrow. Darlene talked, apparently. He shook his head slowly, not in a bad way, in the way of a man recalculating. I said some things, he started. You said it wasn't really a career, I said. I was wrong about that? Yes, I said, you were. He took that. My dad was never a man who found apologies easy, but he was a man who could absorb a correction without flinching, and right now, that was enough. Ansley found me near the coat check at the end of the night. Preston was a few steps behind her, looking at his phone. She looked like she'd been working up to something. I'm sorry, she said, for the dinner. It was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I called you, and I did it anyway. Why? She thought about it. Because it was easier, she said. Because Claudette was making things hard, and you were the path of least resistance, and I took it. I looked at her. She was my sister. She had taught me how to ride a bike and split her Halloween candy with me until I was old enough to get my own and defended me in front of a school bully when I was 9. Even though she was only 11, she had also, without a second call, let our mother uninvite me from a family dinner because her future mother-in-law was a snob. People are not just one thing. Okay, I said. Okay? I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen, I said. But I'm not going to hold it forever either. It's done. You're sorry, I hear you. She hugged me, which caught me slightly off guard. Claudette came to find me as I was packing my equipment. She was the kind of woman who approached things directly, which I actually respected. I owe you an apology, she said. What I said, what I implied about your work, your profession, that was snobbery. Plain and simple. I'm not proud of it. I looked at her for a moment. I appreciate you saying that, I said. Marguerite speaks very highly of you, she said. And now I see why. She paused. I'd like to hire you. Preston's sister is getting married in October. In Lake Geneva, we were still looking for a photographer. She named the budget. It was the largest single event fee I had ever been offered. I kept my face very still. I'd need to check my calendar, I said. October books early. Of course, she said. Please let me know. She handed me her card and walked away. I stood there for a moment with my equipment half packed, the card in my hand, the room slowly emptying around me. Then I finished packing. I walked out into the February night, Chicago February, which is not gentle, which is cold in a way that has opinions, and I stood on the sidewalk for a minute before I called my car. Marguerite had texted while I was packing, heard it went well. Revenue is applause. I smiled at my phone, sent back a thumbs up, thought about how far a thumbs up could travel and what it meant depending on who sent it. I checked my calendar when I got back to my hotel room. October was open. I emailed Claudette that night and told her I would be honored. Not because I needed her approval, not because her apology erased anything, or because Preston and his lake house and his fleece vest suddenly made sense to me, but because the work was good and I love the work, and sometimes the most clarifying thing you can do is be excellent in front of the exact people who doubted you and then keep going anyway. The award I had won the previous spring, a regional recognition from a professional photographers association. Nothing that would mean much to anyone outside the industry, but something I had cried a little over in my car in the parking lot after, was sitting on the shelf above my desk back home. I thought about it on the flight back, about the way it caught the light in the mornings, about the fact that I had never told my parents it existed. I thought maybe now I would. I think about the 15 minutes I spent on the floor a lot. Not with sadness, not anymore. More the way you think about a road you almost didn't take. Because something happened in those 15 minutes that I couldn't have named at the time but understand now. I made a decision about who I was going to be when no one was watching. And that decision, more than any contract or booking or award on the shelf, is what changed everything that came after. There's a version of this story where I called my mother back and argued, where I spent the next year proving myself loudly, making sure everyone knew what I was building, sending updates no one asked for, just to watch them revise their opinion. I understand that version. I've felt the pull of it. But I think if I'd taken it, I would have been building for the wrong reason, for their approval instead of my own conviction. And work built on that foundation tends to crack. What I did instead was something quieter. I kept showing up. Not to prove anything, just because the work was worth showing up for. And I think that's the part nobody talks about, that integrity isn't just about being honest with other people. It's about being honest with yourself, about what you're doing and why, and then doing it the same way whether anyone's watching or not. I photographed weddings the same way when I was charging $200 as I did when I was charging 10 times that. I cared about the elderly man wiping his eyes at the gala the same way I cared about the quinceañera, where the DJ played the same song on a loop. That consistency, that refusal to phone it in, is the only reason Marguerite trusted me, and the only reason Claudette had already been showing my work to people before she ever met me. And Marguerite. I want to say something about Marguerite. She didn't hand me anything. She said 3 sentences over dinner and restructured the way I thought about my own value. That's what real guidance looks like. Not someone doing it for you, but someone trusting you enough to tell you the truth and then stepping back. She saw something in my work that I hadn't fully seen in myself yet, and she named it. That kind of clarity is worth more than almost anything. I also think about Ainsley. The way she said it was easier. I respect that she said it. Most people dress that choice up in something more palatable. She didn't. And here's what I've come to understand. The people we love are not always going to be brave on our behalf. Sometimes they're going to take the path of least resistance right through us. Forgiving that isn't the same as saying it was fine. It means understanding that people are limited in ways that have nothing to do with how much they love you, and deciding what to do with that understanding. What I did with it was keep the relationship and release the resentment. Not because I'm especially good at forgiveness, but because carrying it would have cost me more than it cost them. I had work to do. I couldn't afford the wait. The award on my shelf is not what I'm proud of. I'm proud of the 15 minutes on the carpet and what came after. That's where the real work started.